In our previous lecture, we examined the Bible's depiction of the religious systems of ancient Canaan. We studied the depictions of some of the gods of Baal and Asherah. And we examined a curious connection that the Bible continually makes between illicit sexual activity and idolatry. This is a constant theme in the biblical account. In our lecture today, we're going to take some of this material about the activities of the gods in the various civilizations of the ancient Near East and look at creation accounts, at how the gods are involved in creation. To generalize about these varied and various accounts, in them, the forces of chaos are battling the forces of order, and creation comes out of the establishment of order. And there's a verse in the creation account of the Bible which really captures this idea of order and chaos. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. This is the picture before creation. Now, as I hope to demonstrate in this lecture, the Egyptian and Mesopotamian myths, unlike the biblical account, present origin stories which are different from both a literary standpoint and a theological standpoint. In the creation stories of the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, we have, by definition of those systems, many gods involved in the process. In the Hebrew Bible, there is the one creating God. In the ancient Near Eastern religions, we have struggles among the gods. And we're going to be looking at two texts today which involve struggles and interactions among the gods, and out of those interactions and struggles, we get creation. In the Egyptian text, we know as the Memphite theology, the theology of Memphis. The god Ptah, who's the god of that locality, creates the other gods. Now, he creates the other gods, but he doesn't remain transcendent. He himself is engaged, he's immanent in the world. We're going to follow that look at the Egyptian story with a look at a Mesopotamian story, at the creation material embedded in the Enuma Elish, a text we've referred to before in this series, the text that was read on the Babylonian New Year. And that text, like the Egyptian text, not only explains the struggle between the gods and explains creation, it also links the kings of those countries to the gods. So what does this accomplish? It tells the people, the listener, about the origins of things, and it also affirms that the rule of their country has to stay stable in order for the products of creation to stay stable, in order for things to stay the same, which in their thinking was good. You'll recall that the thinking was that a certain perfection is achieved early in history through the gods, and that, sadly, we only go downhill from there. This is the opposite of our idea of progress. Although many of us are skeptical about the idea of progress, we still are deeply influenced by this idea that we're going forward. Now, the gods in these creation stories they appear in multiple and conflicting accounts. There's no attempt at consistency, either within any given account or across accounts. Now, the Bible generally is consistent, but there too, in accounts of creation, we see some inconsistencies. One very famous one, which I will allude to again in this lecture, is the two ways that the creation of humankind is depicted in Genesis, the one in which man and woman are created at the same time, the other in which woman is created out of man's rib. Now, stories of creation in Egypt share something with the Bible. Yes, they are polytheistic and the Bible is monotheistic, but what they share is the idea of creation through speech. Of course, that's the essence in Genesis. God spoke, and the animal, thing, sea, whatever force or object of nature, it came into being through the word. In Egypt, this is done through the personage of the god Ptah, P-T-A-H. And he's the god who's featured in this Egyptian Memphite theology. A word about this title, it sounds scholastic, doesn't it, or medieval. The Memphite theology. Well, this is not the title that the Egyptians gave it. This is a recurring theme in our series, that when we read these titles, when I mention them and when you read them in the books, in our bibliography, which I hope you'll study, the translators, my teachers, scholars of an earlier generation, said, this is a work about theology and it comes from Memphis. Let's call it the Memphite theology. The ancient Egyptians didn't have a title for it. And again, to hearken back to our very modern commercial idea about books, they didn't have a name for the book and they didn't have a name for the author. They knew there was a text that described creation. There were many of them, and this was one of them. When speaking of the origins of writing, I evoked the Mesopotamian and Egyptian idea that writing enables civilization. You need to think of something first, then write it. When you have it written down, you can take it into action. This same process is seen as going on with the gods and with this specific god. The god has a heart. The heart of the god is the place where the idea springs from. In these societies, the heart is the equivalent of our idea of the mind. The heart is the place of the concept. The speech act is the tongue of the god. So the god has both heart and tongue. And using heart and tongue, the god creates. I will read you some of this text. Thus it happened that the heart and tongue of Ptah gained control over all of the body. Well, that's something that many of us would like to do, gain control of ourselves through our heart and our tongue, right? There's a psychological aspect to this too. And we're reminded that Ptah is in every body and every mouth of all gods, men, cattle, and creeping thing. The 9 gods, this is the Aeneid of the Egyptians, a Greek word used to describe them, or the Ennead, pronounced differently. He brought the gods into being. He brought cities and temples into being. He assigned the gods to their cities. But oddly, this is my interjection, the one thing that we don't read about in this theology is about how humans are created. So what did he do? He created gods, and then he created cities and temples. Well, why do you have to create cities and temples if there are no people? It's very curious. Now, in other Egyptian texts, in texts about the god Ra, we have some reference to creation, but it comes in an oblique fashion. It's in a story about destruction. There's a threat to destroy humanity, and Ra saves humanity. And from that, we can infer what their ideas of creation were. But they didn't have a story like the story in Genesis, where humans are created directly through a conscious act of the god. So we have this odd skipping that I'd like you to pay attention to. He creates the 9 gods, he creates the cities and the temples. Now, let us move from this Egyptian idea, the heart and tongue of the god, creating the gods and the places where humans dwell, to a story that's more precise, a story from Mesopotamia, from among the Babylonians, that's in the story that is embedded in the text of the Enuma Elish. Embedded is an important word here. One of the points I'm making in this lecture is that we don't have a text which opens with a creation account, which is what the Bible does. We have to search through Mesopotamian literature, Egyptian literature, to try to find out what their ideas were. So you have to go through a lot of material, and then you can infer from that material what their ideas were. And you'll see there are these curious lacunae. Hey, what happened to people? Who created people? The Mesopotamians are a little more specific. And I'm going to read from the ritual text of the New Year, the Enuma Elish. I'll be reading and then interjecting some modern comments, contemporary comments. Before the heavens or earth were named, there was Apsu, the first, the begetter, and the goddess Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. These two mingled their waters together. These are the first two primary beings of the cosmology. Apsu, who represents the sweet waters of the earth, the waters of the rivers, the waters of the wells, the springs under the earth. And Tiamat, the goddess of the ocean, of the salt sea, of the great deep. And what do? They mingle their waters together. This is a sexual image. Again, as we've seen with the Canaanite gods, this mixture of the sexual and the cosmological, something that, for the most part, the Bible distances itself from. Now, from this union of Apsu and Tiamat, of the sweet waters and the salt waters, other gods are born. Lesser gods. The first pair represents the heavens and the earth, and then we go down the order of being to all sorts of aspects of nature and of the animal world. And there's a genealogy of the gods, a phrase popularized, of course, by Nietzsche, but a phrase really applicable to these ancient Near Eastern civilizations. We have big family trees of gods. They're very complicated when you look at them. At a point in the genealogy, the god Marduk, who is identified with Baal, a god we've spoken of many times in the Semitic realm. In the Mesopotamian stories, Marduk is the young god who becomes the champion. Champion, not in the sense of the final victor, but in the sense of when there's a struggle among the gods, he's the great warrior who goes out to do battle and to organize other gods and other forces of nature. Marduk battles Tiamat, who is in a sense his mother, not his direct mother, but his cosmic predecessor, because she's one of the two great forces out of which the cosmos was born. She's the goddess of the sea and symbolizes formlessness and chaos. She has allies. In these struggles of the gods, there are coalitions of the willing and the unwilling. There are allies. So each side tries to get allies. And there are officers in this struggle. Tiamat's forces are under the control of a general named Kingu. The hero, Marduk, is sent off to war by the other gods. When the gods, his fathers, saw the fruit of his words, joyfully they did homage. Marduk is king. They conferred on him scepter, throne, and vestment. They gave him matchless weapons that ward off the foes. Go and cut off the life of Tiamat. May the winds bear her blood to places undisclosed. Baal's destiny thus fixed, that is, the destiny of Marduk, also called Baal, the gods, his fathers, caused him to go the way of success and attainment. Well, this is a very human portrayal. So let's take it away from the level of the gods to the level of royalty. There's a young champion of the nobility. He's being sent out to do battle. Or you could take it to the level of the family. It's a young fellow. Go out and do good work. Do something good, right? Protect our cause. Do battle for us against the forces of evil. In order to do this, the young god has to arm himself. He constructed a bow, marked it as his weapon, attached thereto the arrow, fixed its bow cord. He raised the mace, made his right hand grasp it. Bow and quiver he hung at his side. In front of him he set the lightning. With a blazing flame he filled his body. This would make a great animated movie. That's the way I've imagined it, right? This character that arms itself and all of these great weapons that are going to help him. And he has the forces of nature, the lightning, the thunder, the storm. And what does he do with all this? He then made a net to enfold Tiamat therein. He's going to try to conquer the great chaotic sea and in the realm of ideas, the realm of the void. The four winds he stationed, that nothing of her might escape. The south wind, the north wind, the east wind, the west wind. Close to his side he held the net, the gift of his father Anu. Anu, the great heaven god, the god I've spoken of as removed from the affairs of humanity. The text goes on to enumerate other forces, different winds. It counts all the winds of the world, winds that the ancient reader would be familiar with. They all come to help Marduk in his struggle against Tiamat. What do? They stir up the inside of Tiamat. Then the Lord raised up the flood storm, his mighty flood storm. He mounted the storm chariot, irresistible and terrifying. Well, the portrayal is that the forces that are with this young god, once he's been blessed by the fathers, that is the greater gods, he has to win. He's destined to win. And the thing about this text, it's a ritual text. The people hearing it know every time what's going to happen in the end. It's not a suspense of who's going to win this fight. And they know, because it's a text celebrating kingship, that the forces of order will conquer the forces of chaos. But the drama has to be stated and enacted. And now we get the last description of the battle which kills the forces of chaos. He harnessed and yoked it, that is his storm chariot, to a team of four. And who are these four? The killer, the relentless, the trampler, the swift. Sharp were their teeth, bearing poison. They were versed in ravage, in destruction skilled. On his right he posted the smiter, fearsome in battle. On the left, the combat, which repels all the zealous. For a cloak, he was wrapped in an armor of terror. With his fearsome halo, his head was turbaned. The Lord went forth and followed his course. Toward the raging Tiamat he set his face. And he subdues her. Having thus subdued her, he extinguished her life. He cast down her carcass to stand upon it. After he had slain Tiamat the leader, her band was shattered, her troop broken up. Well, a great story of the contending between the forces of order and the forces of chaos, but I hope you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with the creation of humans? I'm giving an account of creation stories. This doesn't seem to be a creation story. And here I want to illustrate my point of the embedded creation idea. We're in a story about conflict, and all of a sudden there's this very strange detail. You'll remember that these forces of chaos had a leader, a general named Kingu. Kingu is executed by our hero, Marduk. And what does Marduk do then? All of a sudden in the text, he orders Ea, also known as Enki, his Sumerian name, to use Kingu's blood to make humans. He's supposed to mix the blood of the blood of the god, with clay to make human beings. So this is an idea of how humans are formed. There's some of the divine, although it's the divine that's the foe. Notice what divine being is chosen as the source of the blood for humans. the general of the forces of chaos. And the text has very specific instructions on making humans. Blood I will mass and cause bones to be. I will establish a savage. Man shall be his name. Savage man I will create. He will be charged with the service of the gods that they might be at ease. So we're told how humans are created, and we're told why they're created. To serve the gods, because the gods need to take it easy. They have to be propitiated in order so that they don't take out their rage against humanity. And this is an extra reason, I think, that this text was read at the Babylonian New Year. It not only establishes the idea of the kingship of the gods, it not only connects the idea of the kingship of the gods to human kingship, it, in brief, tells the story of how and why people were created. And it reminds people, when they're reading this story, that the whole reason that they're here on earth is to do service to the gods. And doing service to the gods is a specific set of instructions. It's not general. It's not what we might call a spiritual idea, although one could say there might be spiritual ideas lurking behind it. But the way that it's articulated is that it's service. Service in the sense of the cult. Cult in the sense of the ritual. What you're supposed to do. You're supposed to bring sacrifices. You're supposed to dress the statues of the god and bring them food. You're supposed to respect the images of the god. Now, these two myths, the Egyptian Memphite theology and the Babylonian Enuma Elish, provide insights into the foundational ideas of the societies that produce them. And that speaks to the approach to myth that says that from myth we can learn something about a culture's understanding of itself. They also are told in very vivid fashion. They're great literary works, and they remind us of the approach to myth, which is a form of the appreciation of the aesthetic. So these can be appreciated by us as works of literature, as they were no doubt appreciated by the ancients. And this notion that creation is embedded tells us something about the way that the ancient cultures organized their presentation of self. That presentation does not start with an account of how humanity comes into being. And I want to contrast that now with the way the self-presentation of the Western world understands itself, the way that the West presents itself in the pre-modern period, and to some extent in modernity, through a biblical eye. That is, the book opens with an account of creation. The first thing you want to know is what is the origin of the world, and very quickly, if you recall in Genesis, within the first chapter, in the current verse system, by verse 26, we read about the creation of humanity. And that creation is presented as the crown of creation. That is, the purpose of creation is to produce human beings. In the Bible, there is one place where this creation account occurs, and it's highlighted. It's there up front. There are some variations within that account, which I'll speak about in a moment, but it's very clear that this is the singular account. In Egypt, in Mesopotamia, and in cultures which we haven't dealt with in this specific lecture in terms of creation stories, among the Hittites, among the Canaanites, in those cultures, there are multiple and sometimes conflicting accounts. There is no attempt at consistency and no claim at consistency. So against the background of the Memphite theology and the Enuma Elish, let us look at the opening of the story of the creation of humans in Genesis. And I'm reading from Genesis 1:26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. This is the first creation account. Male and female created he them. Now, as soon as they are created, there's a statement about their function, but it's different than the functions that we saw mentioned in the Enuma Elish, the functions of serving the gods. Serving God is an important function, delineated as early as the book of Genesis, but it's not the reason for creation. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be as food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. In the account that precedes what I just read in the book of Genesis, all of creation is laid out before us in the days before the sixth day. The heavens, the earth, vegetation, the animals. Now that humans are created, we have a recapitulation, a re-enumeration of the components of creation. And the purpose of creation is to serve man. Notice how different then that is than the concept that the purpose of humanity is to serve the gods. A radically different concept. And what comes immediately after this and the evening and the morning were the sixth day, this close of the creation of humans? Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. This is creation. This is how it ends, and this is where it should end, because humans now appear on the scene. And this leads us into the idea of the Sabbath. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from the work which he had made. So we have a link between the idea of rest, a human need, and the idea of the completion of creation. In this lecture, we have examined creation accounts from Egypt and Mesopotamia, specifically the Memphite theology and the Enuma Elish, and we have contrasted them with the creation account in Genesis. In our next lecture, we will move from creation accounts to a study of what scholars today call the epics of the gods, a set of tales from the city of Ugarit, now in Syria on the Mediterranean coast, in which we read of the conflicts between the gods, a conflict which doesn't engage humans directly, and it doesn't bring to the creation of humans, but it tells us something about the understanding in the Canaanite sphere of the interaction between gods and humanity.